Math and science are topics that make some students cringe. It's rare to find those subjects as the driving force behind a science fiction novel. Author Richard Schmidt is here to talk about his book, End Space. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
And your book called End Space, what is it about?
Well, as you mentioned, it's science fiction, but in addition to just being fiction, I wanted to stress the science. So I'm a former math teacher and a teacher at heart, so I wanted to include as much real math and as real science as possible, but do it in an entertaining and informative way.
Well, the entertaining way is probably the plot. What is the general plot of this novel?
A future that contains many different worlds, that the main character, Jana Maines, visits as a transport pilot in training to carry goods and things between these worlds. So she encounters the different cultures.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about the math and the science that you worked into it, and that's what makes this book unique. What was your goal when you decided to write this book? To educate while entertaining. To make it a fun read, but that when the person come away from it, they knew more than when they started. Sure, okay. And how will people learn through the scientific concepts in this book? How does that happen?
Well, first off, I present problems, and while there are a few throwaway answers in there, there is a technical section at the back, generally footnoted in the story so that it doesn't interrupt the story flow. But if they want more information, they can see what equations I used and how I worked through those problems.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about the back of the book. And if I look here, about 2/3 of the book is the story part. And then 1/3 of it is what you've referred to as the back of the book. There's poetry, there's music, there's scientific equations and graphs. It's more than a story. And how did you get the idea to fuse all this together?
Well, I wanted it to be as you said, a total package, an educational experience. For example, the title, End Space, refers to the fact that while we normally think of space as being three-dimensional, we can work our way to end space by imagining a one-dimensional universe, a line, curving that into 2 dimensions.
Right, and we have a picture of that. I'd like to put that up one more time because you're explaining this exactly. So go ahead and explain that.
All right, so one-dimensional space would be a line, bend that or curve it into 2-dimensional space. That creates 2 space, or like a sheet, a plane. Curve that, you go into 3 space, which is what we're used to. But now, the next step, curve that 3-dimensional space into 4 dimensions. And you could go on in that way to any number of dimensions, hence end space. We don't know exactly how many dimensions there really are in space.
Sure. So there's theory involved in this as well. How did your background help you develop concepts for the book?
Well, as mentioned, I was a science and math teacher. I do have undergraduate degrees in math and physics. But I've also been anti-submarine warfare operator and air crewman, so I have experience in the air, which I use in the story in terms of what it's like to fly. Also been an air traffic controller and currently a radar technician.
Okay, so all of that mixed together gets thrown into science fiction. Okay, and you even drew the illustrations for the book. The cover, there's illustrations throughout. Right. We're looking at one right now. Was it your goal to do everything for this book? I mean, a lot of times people say, hey, you're an artist, can you draw this for my book? Why did you do all that?
Well, that's a great question. One of the frustrating things for me as a reader has been that very often what the writer envisioned and what the artist hired to do the illustrations doesn't always mesh. So in this case, when you see those illustrations, that's exactly the way I imagined it.
Sure, okay, excellent. Well, and this isn't your full-time job. Did you always have the plan of writing a book?
I've always had the desire to write and tell stories. But through the encouragement of my wife and daughters, they said, stop talking about it, do it. So I did.
The push. And you use a pen name, Chris Martin, with your book. What is the purpose of that? Why did you do that?
Well, I just thought it sounded a little easier on the ears than Richard Schmidt. So Chris Martin is in fact my middle name. So it really is me, but it just read a little easier.
Sure, okay. And what is the ultimate message you hope people get from reading this book?
Well, that learning can be fun, that it isn't just boring stuff, but that there are real-life applications, which is what I tried to do, is come up, yes, it's creative, but there really are applications of physics and math, and music, and philosophy. It's an entire educational package.
Sure. And real quickly, one last question. You're getting you have the book published, and was it a big process to do that?
It was about 2 years of the publication part.
Sure. All right. Well, the best of luck selling copies. It certainly is an interesting way to put science fiction together. Thanks for coming on the show and talking about it.
Thanks for having me, and I hope you enjoy it.